Okay, and it started, Chair.
Beth, wel, bore da i chi gyd, a croeso i chi yn ffurfiol i'r cyfarfod yma o'r is-bwyllgor trafnidiaeth rhanbarthol dan cydbwyllgor corfforedig De-orllewin Cymru. Cyn mynd ymellach, mae rhaid atgoffa pawb fod y cyfarfod yma yn cael ei ddarlledu'n fyw neu'n ddiweddarach drwy wefan y cyngor. Felly, drwy gymryd rhan i chi'n cytuno i gael eich ffilmio ac y delweddau a recordio sain hynny gael ei defnyddio at ddibenion gweddarlledu a hyfforddiant o bosib. Gael atgoffa fawr i offod i ffonau symudol yn distaw os ych chi'n gallu. Felly gyda hynny, wnawn ni symud ymlaen i'r ail eitem, sef datganiadau o fuddiant. Os yna unrhyw ddatganiad yn dwylo y bore yma? Dwi'n credu na, dim fel arfer ys e. Na, felly allwn ni symud ymlaen te i'r trydydd eitem, sef derbyn y cyfnodion y cyfarfod blaenorol nôl yn mis Mehefin, ac cytuno bod rheini'n gywir. Mae'r cyfnodion hynny ar dudalennau 3 i 8. Os yna unrhyw sylwadau ar y cyfnodion, neu os yw'n hapus i gynnig bod nhw'n gywir?
Hapus i gynnig arweinydd.
Diolch Edward. A os yw'n hapus i eilio bod nhw'n gywir?
Iawn.
Ie, gret. Diolch Gwyndem, thank you very much. A gallai ofyn i bawb i ddangos trwy godi'ch llaw os ych chi'n hapus i dderbyn yn ffurfiol. Pawb o blaid.
Those approved, Chair.
Diolch yn fawr. Felly gyda ni de, nawn ni symud ymlaen i'r eitem 4 ar yr agenda, sef y drafft terfynol yn yr cynllun cyflawni trafnidiaeth rhanbarthol De-orllewin Cymru. Mae'r adroddiad yma ar dudalen, yn dechrau ar dudalen 9 ac yn rhedeg trwyddo i dudalen 40. Wrth gwrs, ni wedi bod yn trafod hyn ers peth amser, a ni wedi cyrraedd y man yma erbyn hyn ac yn ddiolchgar iawn wrth gwrs i'r swyddogion am y gwaith sydd wedi bod yn digwydd yn y cefndir i gyrraedd y pwynt yma. Felly, cyn gofyn i'r swyddogion i gyflwyno'r adroddiad y bore yma, mae'n bwysig bod ni'n nodi bod Appendix 3 yn y pecyn yn gyfyngedig o achos y gwybodaeth ariannol sydd yn nghlwm a hynny. Felly, os oes yna unrhyw gwestiynau penodol neu unrhyw sylwadau penodol ar Appendix 3, fydd rhaid bod ni'n mynd mewn i sesiwn breifat ac felly neu ofyn i aelodau i gymryd hynny mewn i ystyriaeth. Os oes yna unrhyw sylw neu gwestiwn ar Appendix 3, os ydych chi'n siŵr bod chi'n dod â hwnna i'n sylw i, a wedyn fe awn ni mewn i'r sesiwn breifat. Felly, gyda hynny fel cyd-destun, gael ofyn i Stuart i ddechrau bant i roi'r trosolwg i ni cyn bod ni'n agor hynny mas am unrhyw sylwadau neu cwestiynau gan yr aelodau. Diolch, Stuart.
Diolch yn fawr iawn, Cadeirydd. Na i symud drosodd i Saesneg jyst i rhedeg trwy hwn. Thank you very much. What I'll do, I'll just briefly introduce and then I'll hand over to Lee to go through a little bit more detail. So the purpose really, we're seeking endorsement from the subcommittee for the proposed regional transport delivery plan and the year 1 investment programme, which aligns with that one. So in terms of what will be going forward from this meeting, really the recommendations are that there's to note the sort of verbal progress in terms of where we've got to from the regional transport plan itself, which as the Chair said, we've brought forward at various stages. To also note the position in terms of the funding with a position from Welsh Government where we are at present on there. And then, as I say, finally to endorse the Year 1 investment programme. But what I'll do is I'll hand over to Lee just to run over some of the bit more detail about the development of the programme itself. And yeah, Lee, if you're okay, I'll bring you in at that stage.
Yeah, thank you, Stuart, and good morning, Chair. If you could just bear with me a second, I'm just about to turn the camera on. I was just moving to get a better signal. So if you just bear with me. Right, okay, there we go. That's a little better. Right, so yeah, so just in terms of a verbal update then, Chair, as you're aware, the CABSEC has now approved the actual RTP, so the policies, etc., are now live. Excuse me. A lot obviously has focused on year 1 in terms of what is before you this morning. I think the report is reasonably self-explanatory, but obviously the year one programme is quite important to us in terms of setting what we're going to do from and invest in from 1st of April next year. I think there are three topical issues, if I may, Chair, first of all. One is that we are looking at categorisation of the schemes in terms of we're being asked by the Welsh Government to recategorise some of the schemes, particularly those that are multimodal and resilience. We are being asked to consider those mainly as highway schemes. Excuse me. Obviously, there's a challenge there, Chair, in terms of the fact that highways is not favoured by the RTP guidance. So we are looking at trying to find a resolution to calling those schemes highway schemes that have got multimodal elements. The recommendation is that we do move to actually ban those schemes as highway schemes, but then obviously add in quite a strong message that they're multimodal, active travel, public transport and so on. So that's our view on those schemes. The second issue is schemes that roll over, and officers are looking at that at the moment in terms of we're setting the year one programme, but there's also years 2 and 3 where we've got some potential to roll some of the funding across. Now, the recommendation from the officers, Chair, is that we look at schemes that are going to be half built at the end of year one. Obviously, they should have first priority. So we apply the started, so we'll finish principle to those. The second element to that and the rollover is that there are programmes at a regional level where there are a number of activities across the region that we may want to consider in terms of continuing those programmes, and the officers are looking at those at the moment. So I think that will evolve, Chair, in terms of what will roll forward into years 2 and 3. But certainly we are going to complete what we started in year one. So that's the main thrust of that. The third issue, is that we've now got a letter from the CABSEC inviting us to consider potential extra budget again. Members may recall that this was on offer, offered up by the Welsh Government in some of their guidance a little while ago over the summer. It was then took away on the basis of some of the political discussions, but the CABSEC has now offered potentially a further 5.5 to 11 million pounds in year one. So challenges there, I think, and the officers are considering exactly how we respond to this, but two key pertinent points, I think, Chair. One is to look at the regional type schemes, those multi sort of faceted schemes across the region that were listed in the programme, and trying to and I think the second element to this, Chair, is obviously it's fair to say that some of the budgets were really pared down, as you know, to get us to the target that we were working to that was announced a few weeks ago in terms of 24.3 million. So we are looking at that. So we are looking firstly to ask Welsh Government officials about the draft budget announcement yesterday to see whether that has confirmed this potential additional funding or otherwise. I think that will take Welsh Government officials some time to respond to it, but you know, we are looking at another 20+% if that comes about, or maybe even up to 40+% on the current budget. So quite a significant uplift there. I think the other thing we'd like to see at an officer level, and they're going to recommend this to the full CJC when we've had time to fully digest what the implications of this additional funding could be if it is distributed, is that obviously I think we'd like to see a greater emphasis on metro related projects, particularly those more local metro projects that have been developed by the region to support the wider metro initiatives that we know are taking place, particularly on the rail network. Fine, then there's some other things we'll do as well. I think we are suggesting that officers review the current list of schemes for pressures. Clearly, we're aware there's some funding pressure, and some of those schemes were pared back and pushed into later years. So if additional funding was available, we'd certainly want to pick up on that opportunity to rescope and bring forward some of those schemes that probably would be a slower burn, as it were. And then finally, if there is any additional money left at the end of that period or potential additional funding, we would like to look at the development scheme list and understand what came to the top of that in the prioritisation exercise that you'll be familiar with from a few months ago, and actually see if there's any schemes that have got merit to bring forward or can actually start delivery in year one in particular. So there were some schemes in there that were meritorious, but I think it's fair to say they would have struggled for delivery in year one. There were also some that where we could have actually started in year one. And once again, we'll look at those. So I'm afraid, Chair, there's not a concrete view set of recommendations on those verbal updates that we've indicated in the report. But I think it does give you a flavour that we are, again, working with a moving target, as we briefed to you on a number of occasions in the past. Guidance has been quite late in the day. We do welcome the additional funding, and I believe Councillor Price, as Chair, you're going to send a letter to the CABSEC to welcome this potential additional money and so on. I believe that's in train. I think that's about it, Stuart. Is there anything more to say? I mean, I'm sure the report and the appendices are self-explanatory, Chair, but if there are any more questions, I'm sure Stuart and I are available to answer them.
Yeah, I think to cover the main points, Lee, I think to emphasise it's been a challenge coming up with the delivery plan, I guess the shortlist, because of the levels of funding that we've having to sort of tailor things to. They were obviously less than anticipated and hoped for, and that's something which has posed a significant challenge to the aspirations, I guess, of the region. So, but we have got to something that's robust at the moment, tailored with it. But as I say, it's hopes and expectations that those funding levels can increase and that the Southwest can have more generous levels of funding. So thank you. Thanks, Chair. Thanks, Lee.
Yeah, thank you both for that. Yes, so yes, there's a few things here. So obviously, in terms of what's in front of us today, the first two recommendations are for noting. The third one is around the endorsement of that year one investment programme as we see it at the moment. But obviously, there are some caveats there, aren't there, in terms of the funding as has been highlighted. So I suppose if we take that first of all, and then we can go on to the second bit, which was the letter to the CABSEC, which Lee suggested, I know has been discussed at the rector level across the region as well. So I'll open it up for comments or questions. Clearly, officers have been working for quite some time to try and create that equity across the region, so that there are projects in each of the authorities in line with, of course, our objectives that we set out some time ago when we set out the case for change. So are there any specific questions on the report? In Appendix 2, we've got the full list of schemes there, which is in the public domain, obviously, split by regional and county level as well. But what is not in the public domain is the funding linked to each scheme, of course, given the commercial sensitivities around future tenders. So as I mentioned earlier, if there are specific queries in terms of those figures, then we'd need to go into closed session. But if there are any general questions or general comments on the schemes, then we can take those now. Are there any from members, or are we content? Edwin.
Yeah, diolch yn fawr. Just getting things right in my brain at the moment, actually. So as we stand at the moment, there's no, shall we say, spade being put in the ground. It's just sorting the funding out as yet.
Yeah.
On the way. Na gyd o'n i'n moyn gwybod. Diolch yn fawr.
Yeah. Yeah. So mae'r arian, ni'n sôn am mis Ebrill mlaen blwyddyn nesaf.
Yeah. Okay.
A hwn yw'r flwyddyn cyntaf gyda'r system newydd gyda'r Llywodraeth Cymru, le ni fel rhanbarth yn gorfod blaenoriaethu a penderfynu ble ni moyn buddsoddi. Felly mae'r cam ma'n bwysig wrth gwrs, ac mae fe'n rhestru'r prosiectau ni i ni'n dwmno sy'n bwysig yn y flwyddyn cyntaf. Ond wrth gwrs, yn dilyn ni, fydd angen buddsoddi yn yr ail flwyddyn a'r trydydd flwyddyn yn dibynnu ar maint y prosiect ni'n sôn am.
Ie, yn iawn, fi'n deall. Oce, diolch.
Diolch. Os yna unrhyw sylwadau pellach, fi'n gwybod bod hwn wedi bod yn rhywbeth ni wedi trafod tipyn o gyfer dros y misoedd diwethaf, so dyw e ddim yn newydd yn y bôn, ond mae rhaid bod ni'n cytuno ar hyn yn ffurfiol cyn wneud yr argymhelliad llawn i'r cydbwyllgor corfforedig mewn yn ystod y mis yma. Felly, Wyndham, do you want to come in?
Thank you, Chair. I'd just like to say that it's been a long old haul, but we come into fruition now, and I do welcome the additional funding. It will be useful. And let's crack on. Thanks very much.
Thank you, Wyndham. Thank you. So if there aren't any further questions in terms of the report in front of us, I will put in it was mentioned by Lee that there have been discussions at director level, and members will remember that in the meeting we had with Ken Skates down in Swansea, going back, is it a month and a bit now, isn't it? Month and more maybe, in terms of that funding position with the South West and ensuring parity with the rest of Wales. So we know that there's funding going to the southeast with the Burns Commission. There's funding being allocated to the north as well. So there's a wider point in terms of the funding that's available to us in southwest Wales. As was mentioned earlier, the change in the funding formula means that we've actually received less as things stand, albeit there are discussions around potential further consequentials. But what I was going to suggest was that I know that directors have had a discussion on this, and there's a proposal that we send a letter in my name on behalf of the subcommittee. So what I was going to suggest, Stuart, would you be happy to maybe say a little more on that? And what I was going to suggest was that after the meeting we could circulate a draft to all members for their approval before that is sent. That's the way I'm thinking about approaching it, if that sounds sensible.
Certainly, I'm happy to do that, Chair. I think we've got to the stage. I know the officer group went through yesterday, and I've just been sent a draft through on there, so I'll get that one sent off to yourself for circulation and comment, really, to ensure that it gives the I guess collective agreement on the message that we're going back with on there. So I'm happy to share that one shortly after this meeting. There we are.
That's fine. Does that sound acceptable to members? Is that okay?
Yn iawn, iawn.
So gyda hwnna te, os ydych chi'n hapus, nawn ni gylchredeg y drafft na fel bod ni'n cyfathrebu'n uniongyrchol gyda'r Llywodraeth, ond yn ffurfiol y bore yma, mae eisiau bod ni yn derbyn yr argymhelliad sydd o'n blaenau ni. Felly os nag oes na unrhyw gwestiynau pellach neu unrhyw sylwadau pellach, gai ofyn os oes rhywun yn hapus i gynnig bod ni'n derbyn yr argymhelliad y bore yma?
Hapus i gynnig, Cadeirydd.
Diolch, Edward. A gai ofyn os oes rhywun yn hapus i eilio?
Ie, yn iawn.
Happy second.
Great, wonderful, thank you very much. And could I ask everyone to show them by raising their hands if they're happy to approve the recommendation?
Those recommendations have been approved, Chair.
Great, wonderful, thanks very much. And again, I'd like to place on record our thanks to officers who have been on this journey. It's not been straightforward, and we know that there have been tweaks and changes to guidance and timescales and uncertainty around funding. So it hasn't been easy, and we absolutely appreciate that and are grateful for the way that you've tried to approach it. So diolch yn fawr am hynny. Right, gyda ni de, newn ni symud ymlaen i item 5. A newch chi gofio yn y cyfarfod diwethaf yn credu oedd un o'r llad cyn ni, wnaethon ni gytuno bod Trefnidaeth Gymru yn cael slot penodol ar yn agenda ni ac yn dod yn rheolaidd ato ni fel rhan o trafodaethau mwy eang. Wrth gwrs, mae tipyn ar waith i ni'n sôn am RTP yn gynt, ond mae gymaint o bethau eraill mlaen yn yr rhanbarth. Mae trenau, bysys a lot mwy hefyd. So, croeso i Ben George. Unwaith eto y bore yma. Item 5 yw'r trosolwg a diweddariad y panel cynghori ar rwydwaith T, a mae hyn yn diweddariad llafar. So Ben, are you introducing this for us?
I am, yes, thank you.
Great,
So
thanks so much.
I've got some slides which I'll just pop up on the screen. I did send a note around via Christy Tillman as well before the session. Don't look panicked if you haven't had a chance to look at that, but just there is a note floating around just to sort of furnish this briefly as well. I'll send both these slides and that note around after this session as well, just for clarity as well. And I think the main theme throughout all that I describe here is we really welcome your comments and feedback on all that we're going to sort of discuss here in the next few moments. So I'm here today to talk to you about what we're calling T-Network. If you haven't heard of T-Network as yet, we condense that, we describe it as one network, one timetable, one ticket, one team. And I'll sort of describe that now, obviously, in slightly fuller fashion. We discussed this briefly back in September before seeing the CABSEC just a few days later, but this was just one component of a few things we discussed in that closed session. And I'm mindful, Councillor Roderick, we haven't met before, so I'm Ben George. I'm the head of regional transport here at Transport for Wales. I think everyone else on the call I'm familiar with. Apologies if I've missed anyone, but we're really keen to sort of for you all to embrace this and understand, I suppose, the skills and capabilities that are coming into the public sector, obviously by virtue of Transport for Wales in this instance. So the opportunities to integrate transport within South West Wales and across Wales is growing rapidly. And I suspect we don't yet fully know and understand how to utilise and take advantage of all these skills. But I think one thing that's very clear to us in TFW, there's a lot of good work that's happened here, which you'll have seen. But increasingly, there will be bits and pieces of this challenge and this puzzle, which really rely on good partnership working with you at a local authority and a regional level. And so in you having afforded us the opportunity to come and see you once a quarter, we want to build those relationships and encourage scrutiny and a bit of back and forth towards the work that we're doing. And then likewise, we'd like to ask questions of you, I suppose, in time. Just to really bed this in as to why we're talking about this, this is our remit letter from July 2023. So TFW is an arm's length owned organisation from the Welsh Government, and we operate under remit letters from them. And in this letter in July 23, you'll note there's this second point, although it is weaved in through the whole letter really, that they want us to establish one network, one timetable, and one ticket in the work that we do. So that's why we're doing it. Aside from the fact that I think it's quite a compelling and a good thing to do, we're being asked to do it and tasked by the Senedd to push on in these areas. And this slide here, I'll leave you to dwell on later, but essentially from a Transport for Wales perspective, these are the missions and the phrases to which that we gossip through the business to lay a challenge to each other from an accountability point of view, and to lay that challenge and mission that we're trying to now work out over the coming years. So T-Network, this one network, one timetable, ticket and team, from our point of view, we very much hope in partnership with yourselves that we can establish good standards at a Wales national level that we then cascade and deliver at the regional and local level. We've done this in a number of ways in a rail space, but we've done very little of it outside of that rail estate because obviously we haven't had those powers. We still haven't got those powers in a bus spaces yet before the bus bill receives its royal assent. But certainly looking forwards, if we're going to achieve consistency so that when you, I don't know, get on a bus in Milford Haven, it feels broadly similar to the experience you've had in Dolgellau, it's very difficult for you to establish those standards as a region solely and expect North Wales to have a similar standard. So from a TFW point of view, we're looking to set those standards and those systems so that to some extent your officers have systems they can just pull off the shelf and implement. And at the same time, I suppose just to emphasize the point in case there's any level of doubt, one of the reasons we want to have these conversations with you at this level is also to make sure we understand those local flavours and pressures at the regional level so that we're not just blindly applying national standards in ignorance as well. So we really do encourage that pushback, but I trust you'll understand similarly, you know, consistency in a ticketing space, if nothing else, needs to be driven from a national level. This slide here just runs through, I think, some of the progress that I think we overlook in TFW, and if we're overlooking it, I suspect it's probably not top of your list of things to think about because you've got a lot on your plate. But I think it bears emphasising TFW is only 10 years old. So it was formed in March 15, and obviously the rail sort of side of our business has been the conspicuous piece in the public consciousness, at least, in terms of the new rolling stock that you see running in South West Wales, the Core Value Lines project in the Cardiff area. But I think I'd also emphasise, I think rightly it was recognised that the development of the regional transport plan has been difficult in spots in the last few years. TFW's provided transport planning expertise to assist you in that, and I think those difficulties are a product of doing new things and learning new partnerships amongst yourselves as political representatives and learning how to balance those needs. So I think again, to commend you really for the good progress you've made through that in difficult circumstances. There's obviously other things on here. I think the Bus Act that's expected to receive royal assent early in 26 will be a huge milestone in terms of the changes and the powers that you have as political representatives and the things we can do to provide new coherent services across Wales. And just for those, I think everyone on the call is aware of this, but bus franchising is expected to be implemented in South West Wales first. So that's very good news for you as a CJC. And that is expected to start in 2027. And I was in a meeting with my bus colleagues this morning. That's all proceeding well. Again, thanks to you and your officers for your cooperation in the good work that's being done there to lay those plans in expectation of those powers being cascaded. But I think it's there's a number of issues here that we're talking about in terms of the integration of timetable and ticketing, which when I was within local government, sat with you the other side of the fence, as it were, where there were problems like ticketing, which we just could not affect because we didn't have these powers. An early example of integration then is where we've brought the T1 bus service into essentially the rail environment from a ticketing point of view. So that green line that's on the plan here now is a bus service that runs Carmarthen to Aberystwyth, the Traws T1, in close cooperation and partnership with Carmarthenshire Council. Always worth mentioning that. But in terms of the way it's been set up, you can now buy essentially rail tickets to Lampeter, even though Lampeter does not have a railway station. And so from that passenger point of view, it's a much more simple experience. It's one ticket. The bus meets the train. There's a timetable integration component. And also there's some big cost components, as you can see on this slide as well. So we're trying to do more of this in Wales. Essentially, in this particular example, Cardiff is the halfway point where you can decide whether to take a wholly rail journey via Shrewsbury and over to Aber, or to go via Carmarthen and up to Aber using the T1. A big cost differential on this particular example because we apply dynamic pricing within the TFW space. We're hoping to do more of this, and I think in 2026 we're essentially adding a lot more of these Traws Cymru bus routes into this sort of form of integration. What this looks like in a bus sort of franchising space, I think we still need to describe that better to you, but essentially you can take it as read. It'll look more like this, and we hope that it'll be an easier experience on the whole. So T-Network then, I think just to be clear about what I think this looks like, and I would encourage pushback from you as political representatives and from your officers over time. What we're expecting is if we can hold in Transport for Wales a bit of a coherent view about how bus and rail and frankly local highways also integrate into a system as a whole. So for example, in some of our more rural areas where it's just the most practical thing to drive to your point of transport interchange to interface with public transport, how do we cater for that? And I think what this slide is trying to show, possibly quite clumsily, is just that we understand that there are different parts to the public sector that all own different parts of this puzzle. And so we're looking then to work with you increasingly. We've had some loose conversations like this over months and years past, but these things are now starting to crystallize, and we will start to own new powers. And I really do want to make the most of that and the best of that with you as partners. So we're looking to establish new ways of working. I won't dwell too long on this slide unless you want me to, but essentially what this is trying to emphasise is from a Transport for Wales point of view, we are laying challenges internally to say, how do we integrate services better? I think the two immediate points which I would point you to is performance and analysis. There is data that's coming into Transport for Wales, which I've never seen as a transport planner in my professional career. Some really basic data, if I'm being honest, that perhaps the public on the street would expect us to have had a better handle on public sector, but because of reasons of commerciality and privatization in the bus space, we just haven't really been able to see some really basic figures. And I'd like to liberate that from Transport for Wales to you as political representatives, because if you don't know how many people are on the, I don't know, X1, Swansea to Carmarthen, then how can you decide how valuable that is to you as a political representative? How important is it to your stakeholders if we don't know at all how many people are on there? So we're trying to get that data to you. We're going to bring reliability data to you as well. And that will lay challenge back to us in TFW, and I'll pick up on some of those in a moment. And I suspect some of that will come from us as TFW saying we want to make this better. What can be done in a local environment? And I've no doubt some of those we will find are in areas that just can't be touched for reasons of geography or political expediency. But I think it's just we want to be able to have those open conversations with you as time develops. So in that vein then, and having said an awful lot there, what we're looking to establish with you, we're calling T-Network Advisory Panels. It's the best name we could come up with. I can assure you there were much worse names than this as well. And so in terms of these quarterly meetings, one of my takeaways from today, with your blessing, would be I would like to develop a draft terms of reference for this interaction at a quarterly meeting for your challenge and pushback. Broadly, what we would like to establish with you, and I do emphasize the breadth of what I'm saying to you here, there's a lot to be explored and developed. I would expect that you would see Amanda Phillips, who's on the call here, with some regularity. So she's our regional program manager. You're all very familiar with Amanda. I may also be here, but that we would then slot in representatives to come and really brief you on what you want to hear about, but with the expectation there's coherence between us all as a public sector. Network Rail have already put their hand up and said they would like to be in these sessions once a quarter to explain to you where the pressure points are, if there are points of failure or unreliability, that they would be able to speak to you as on that as political representatives. Likewise, for you to pose questions back to them, and really anyone else in between. We've got a lot of transport expertise and subject matter experts in Transport for Wales. I wouldn't really want all, 150 of them or however many there are to be sat here once a quarter twiddling their thumbs in front of you, but they're there to be called upon. And I think in terms of my terms of reference, I'd like to propose an early membership of who you can expect, but similarly would encourage you to tell us who you would like to see here. In other forums, we do it less in South West Wales because there's less cross-border interaction. We do invite DFT reps in elsewhere in the business, and we've got good relationships with them. If it would be helpful to have someone from DFT to come and speak to you regularly or once every now and then, we could arrange that through this sort of portal as well. The points on the right, and I do emphasize, this is loose and early, but I think that just emphasizes what we're trying to do here. So we're trying to bring multimodal travel together in one space. I think we should probably add a component for the strategic highway network into our monitoring as well, and then to make recommendations. And I do encourage some scrutiny back, and I'll again pick up that on the next slide, scrutiny of us. And then similarly, I suspect when we get into a bus franchising environment, we would also like to be making some requests to you, because essentially TFW will own vehicles and services. You as local authority, highway authorities, will own the highway infrastructure. There's an inevitable interaction there where it'd be good to be able to have some open conversations about what we can do to speed up buses, make them more reliable, etc. These are some early, and I take this all with a pinch of salt now, these are some early dashboards that we're building behind the scenes, the sort of data that we're pulling together. We're essentially, we've got people internally who are going to build some dashboards from data that we already hold, that we're looking to filter by Wales national, regional, and by local authority level. And essentially what this slide is trying to show you, where we've got train and bus, stop and stand, that we can go into the train station, the bus stations in your area, and then look at various performance metrics below those in order to highlight areas where we're performing particularly well, or probably of more interest where we're performing particularly poorly. And I do that, when I say we, I mean public sector globally. Some of that will sit here, some may sit within the local authority space, and then have conversations about how we improve that. And to be very, very clear, I do think there's some really low-hanging fruit that's in the Transport for Wales space that we have not been entirely brilliant at improving in recent history. And I think if we can start putting them on these dashboards, invite your scrutiny, and sort of lay it before us, it'll sort of incentivize improving those. Take these green, amber, reds, well, with probably a bit of blindness to some extent. The idea is that we would be showing you RAG rated sort of interchanges as part of this project. This is another example of another way of laying out. This is a Pontypridd example here, but with some live data. We hold essentially rail data, station entries and exits already. As a transport planner, I hold, sadly, some of those numbers in my head as a function. I'd like to get some of these numbers into your heads as local political representatives. And I think, again, possibly more for your officers, but please, if there is data you think that we hold or that you'd like to see, we will put these on the sheets. Some of the thinking of the old adage of you count what matters, there's plenty that we don't count because we take it for granted. And one particular example in the data that we do hold that we were flagging was, how do people currently travel to train stations? We don't hold anything for bus at the minute, and we are starting to gather that. But how do people travel to the railway station? And we were looking at some of the railway stations in southwest Wales where you've got a surprisingly large amount of people that are travelling there by foot. So just to pick out one, and apologies to Neath Talbot, this isn't by any means suggesting that you're on your own in this area, but 778,000 people travel through Neath station every year. It's a top 10 station in Wales by volume, so quite a significant distributor. 44% of that number walk to the railway station, so a really surprisingly large, given it's a large number already, that's 342,000 people a year are walking to that railway station. I mean, that's good news for us all. But I think what's quite surprising, only 2% of that number do it by bike. So you think, we'd expect that number to be lower, but it's probably surprisingly lower. And I think, personally, speaking aloud and sort of, if I can be so bold, I think some of that is our fault from a TFW point of view, because the provisions at that station are surprisingly poor, given how big the number is. And then there'll be other things like where I think Neath has got good network nearby, but possibly not, to the door of the station. So I think in terms of the conversation that I'd like to have over time, and this can apply to a number of other stations across the network, as you'll appreciate, Haverfordwest had some interesting numbers as well, I seem to recall. There'll be functions of geography in this. I think, to pick another example, where we looked in a Swansea area where we were looking at bus performance, we were identifying some areas of significant congestion, and it was affecting the throughput of buses down to the mumbles. When we looked at why, it was a function of geography and the street layout. And you think, well, unless we're going to do sizable, sort of huge highway works, which is unlikely to be possible in mumbles, for example, we can't affect it. But I think it's just to encourage that conversation to look at, why is there a problem? What can we do about it? Where does it stack in our list of things to do effectively? And I'd encourage you also to come back to us and lay those challenges. So these are some of the dashboards that are coming together. Here's another example around Neath, where, again, this isn't live data, but we do hold some of these numbers in terms of walking and cycling stations, driving to stations, driving as a passenger, etc., to really highlight those areas. So coming back to these T-Network advisory panels, I think if I may just sort of leave you with three things, and I'll follow up with this in an email after the session. I'd encourage you as political representatives and officers, obviously we meet with your officers with a lot more regularity, just think about what sorts of data might you like to see. We're building a lot of these sort of data pools and portals. at the minute. But what would you like to see? And then we can have a conversation about, are we able to generate that data with regularity, and is it data that we can afford to collect as well, I suppose? So what's that data that would be valuable to you in your work? Obviously, to confirm you're happy for us to carry on meeting like this. I'm meeting obviously with you today. I'm seeing North Wales, the equivalent of your group here, on the 15th of December to lay same challenge to them and set in the same sort of working principles. And I will propose to take away from here that I develop a terms of reference to presumably work with your officers in the short term, just to flesh that out and get the proportions right. And I suppose, to be clear, I'm really keen to build a good working relationship here, but keen not to involve a cast of thousands before that's needed, if that's ever needed. But to sort of set a reasonable level of membership to stand before you here and take those questions. So data that I'll see you in 3 months or 4 months, whenever your next meeting is, and that and I'll prepare those terms of reference. And that's all for me. And otherwise, happy to take questions and comments from you all, because I appreciate I've said an awful lot there.
No, that's useful, Ben. Thanks for that. So, yeah, I think there's some fundamentals there that I think we'd all welcome. That availability of data is something we've not had historically, and without it, frankly, how are you going to focus your improvement efforts? So, there's some real fundamentals there, which I think we'd all welcome. Certainly from my point of view, in terms of the advisory panels, I think it would be great to have that ongoing discussion, across all modes of transport, isn't it? And I think when you look at the performance dashboard there that you highlighted, there's scope for lots of different areas to come under scrutiny. Clearly, we need to be careful that we don't overdo it, and that we focus in our efforts. But I think that there are possibilities there, aren't there? And I think one of the points you mentioned there in terms of that one network was around the raft of ways that people travel across the region. And I'm sorry to bang on, and I keep mentioning this, but we are a diverse region, as we keep mentioning, and there are things that I'm sure I would certainly like to see in terms of data, in terms of accessibility, for example, in terms of sparsity and rural areas. So I think that there are probably models that we can agree on, which would give people, the information they want without overburdening and creating problems for the system, because we appreciate there's lots going on at the moment, isn't there? Okay, I'll come back later on. I'll open it up for others to come in at this point. Are there any comments or queries from officers or members at this point? Everyone's hunky-dory, everyone's happy. So I think, in terms of the principle, I think we've accepted that, haven't we, previously? I suppose we had a bit of a flavour there in terms of what might be possible. I particularly like the the dashboard in terms of the RAG rating by town, for example. And again, there's lots of potential there, isn't there? So I think we'd welcome that discussion over the next the next few weeks and months, maybe.
If I may just to add, I suppose, to be clear to you, we'll develop this obviously in iterative fashion, I would expect, as we come before you in subsequent quarters. But to be clear, in terms of bus data, there's a sort of tension that we're handling there at the minute. So as I said, really keen to liberate that data and enable you to be more familiar with it. As of the 4th of November today, that data is all still largely commercial and in part of a privatized industry, obviously. And so once sort of bus franchising powers are adopted in Wales, we can start working into a space where we do liberate it. But we're in this slight limbo period now where we hold some of that data in TFW, but I can't sort of just open those floodgates, and we may not be able to after franchise. We'll have to do that with care, obviously. But we're in that intervening period. So that was just to be clear to you, but I think also signal that trajectory of intent on our part.
Is there? I absolutely accept that, and clearly we can't do it now because we're still in a private space. But would there be scope to have those discussions, in private, in private session, for example? I absolutely accept you can't have that as part of public discourse, but it happens with us in every walk of life. We hold private discussions when we've got commercial sensitivities, and I'd imagine, would we not, as a CJC, be able to follow a similar route then?
Yeah, in the short term, I suspect like longer term this is going to be less of a problem anyway. But yeah, in the short term, I've certainly said to your officers, if there's something right now where you'd like to know that answer, we're likely to be able to answer that in broad proportion. And I think a lot of this, particularly at your level as cabinet members, leader, etc., that we can speak at a level of breadth. You don't need to be getting into the pounds, shillings, and pence, or down to the individual traveller. We can speak in broad proportion quite ably, and we do hold a lot of data that was procured from the bus operators during the pandemic, when essentially public sector was heavily subsidising and keeping that business running. So we've got a lot of historical data that we can share. We're obviously at the same time wanting to show respect and hold that intention with these operators as we work into franchising, because we will be partnering with the same organisations largely after. So we're, at the same time wanting to show them a bit of respect in this transitionary period. But yeah, absolutely. If there are particular issues in your area, please do come and speak to us, and we'll then sort of go and consider how we best answer that.
There we are. That's great. Diolch. Thank you very much. Edwin, do you want to mewn?
Yeah, diolch. Just a point to note, really, and put a feather in everybody's cap. We've been very successful in getting the link from Brecon to Llandovery with the bus which a private operator is operating, and it's absolutely working fantastic. We've got a tremendous good service here with the T6 coming through from Swansea to Sunnybridge to Brecon, and it's opened a new world to many, actually, because this little service quite often is full every day. And of course, it links up with the bus service and going down to Carmarthen, and also train going north Shrewsbury. So it's made tremendous headway, and it's taken a long time to achieve this. And it's unless you're living in the area, it's a job to realise how important this has been to everybody's lifestyle, and it's opened up a new world for several people, I can assure you. So feather in your cap. Diolch yn fawr. Ta.
That's very kind. Thank you, Councillor. That's good news, and I'll certainly pass that back to the team here.
Yeah. And Ben is promising a lot more tea services as well. That's what you said last time, wasn't it?
Yeah.
But the point is well made, and mae lot o'n cymunedau gwledig ni.
Oes.
Dy'r gwasanaethau just ddim na, a fel ti'n gweud, mae'n cael effaith real ar bobl, yn ei gallu nhw i fi mas i wneud gwahanol bethau, a mae wir angen ffocws ar ni, fi'n credu. Mae'n rhywbeth sydd wedi cael ei golli, fi'n credu, dros y degawdau diweddar.
Dim ond un problem os rhywun o gweud Ponsenni, Sunnybridge, moyn mynd i Caerdydd, mae rhaid i nhw mynd mewn i Aberhonddu cynta i dal y T4 i Merthyr ar Caerdydd. Ti'n modd, fel os ni'n byw ffordd hyn, maen nhw'n mynd ar y shortcut dros yr Rydins draw i Libanus a'n dal y bus yna, ond na, mae'n gweithio dda iawn dros ben, mae rhaid i fi gweud.
Good. Falch i glywed. So, just to be clear, Ben, you mentioned the terms of reference, but as you see this working practically, what you're suggesting is that you bolt on to these subcommittee meetings. We're not talking about creating additional meetings or over and above the way. It's just a case of a regular slot, essentially.
Yeah.
Okay, it would be badged as the network advisory panels, but it would just form part of our regular committee meetings.
My personal view is that proportionality is key. That feels certainly for the foreseeable like a reasonable way to do it. I suppose, none of us know essentially what this looks like at a point of maturity, because this could take 20 years to mature in some respects, isn't it? But I guess, and in a franchise environment, what are those conversations that we might need to have with you at a political level? It's not unforeseeable that could need its own extra meeting because it would become unmanageable. But I think for the time being, I think if we can just establish a principle that you'd expect to see us and we have these conversations, then we'll work our way into that space, and again encourage that back and forth as to what's useful to you as well. But for now, these dashboards, what I've said to the team here is I would like to have in front of you as an absolute basic just how many people are on the train, is it reliable? How many people are on the buses? Are they reliable? And then we've got various other interesting metrics below that we're working on, but that you as councillors are familiar with the volumes that are travelling in these areas. Because I think particularly in a bus space, I've got loads of anecdotes from my professional experience where we've essentially undervalued those buses because I wasn't able to convey to you as political representatives why you should care. Like how many people are on there? Is it 20 or is it 200? And if we can't do that, it's very difficult for you to decide how important that is to you. So if we can just start doing that, it's really basic, but it'll transform the way that we sort of look at these things, I think.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Chloe?
Yeah, just to jump in on the meeting kind of setup, is it okay, Ben, if I speak with you after outside of the meeting? I'm going to check with our monitoring officer what he feels is the most appropriate way to kind of set these meetings up, whether they are incorporated into this subcommittee or whether we kind of use the timing that we have for the subcommittee and separate them into subcommittee and then the advisory panel, which could follow on. So yeah, I think those discussions are to be had, and we'll update the committee then when we've got something set in stone.
Okay, thank you, Chloe. Yeah, no problems.
Great, diolch. Edwin, come on mewn.
Yeah, point of reliability, I think needs looking into the train from Llandefri north to Shrewsbury. There's been several issues over many months. You can't rely, you go so far, then the train stops, you have to catch a bus or taxi, whatever it is. That service needs looking into as soon as possible, to be honest with you.
There we go. Yeah, thank you. Very helpful. We'll certainly pick that up as a point of specificity.
Edward is going to come in to agree here now as a member for Llandailo.
Yeah, I will totally agree with that. The Heart of Wales line needs to be seriously looked at. The running stock is completely out of date, unreliable, and that's all I'm doing is fending off comments from constituents along the route. So yeah, Heart of Wales, priority for TFW. Also, maintenance of their stations, really poor maintenance on especially around Llandailo.
Can I ask, Councillor Thomas, have you got contacts within Transport for Wales to pick up those points at the moment?
I have.
Right. Okay, yeah, that's fine.
But I'm not seeing much feedback on actual work being done.
Do you know that name off the top of your head, who that's going to, please?
No, I don't. It's on my system here.
Yeah, that's right. We'll pick up with you outside the meeting. Okay, thank you.
Okay, cheers.
As a starter for 10 there, Ben, a flavour of the type of discussions we can have as part of the advisory panel, right? We won't go into any other line at the moment.
A rod for my own back, I suspect, yeah.
We'll just leave that hanging there for now, but
it's very difficult to get a taxi from Llangamach if the train don't come any further, if you've got to come back down to Llandailo or Llandefri or wherever it may be.
Yeah.
And that has happened a lot of times. It's as Councillor Thomas said, this is urgent, needs looking at.
Thank you.
I suppose, yeah, so I think just an example, isn't it? And there'll be lots of other areas that we would want to focus on. I suppose the one question I've got, Ben, is I appreciate us having the opportunity to engage in this, but we're talking here of exec members in the main, executive or cabinet members and or leaders, you know. I suppose it's a piece of work to be done in terms of thinking of how we engage the wider membership, because I know, you know, obviously we've got within the CJC, there's the scrutiny committee, you know, which has membership from non-executive members then, you know. And of course, you know, with the bus franchising, you know, each local authority engage with their own members just to get a feel for that, because I think there will be instances like we've heard with Edward, they're very, very localized, you know, where those local members will be able to add context, which we might not be able to, you know. And I'm just wondering, and I appreciate the capacity constraints, you can't be speaking to every, you know, constantly because you need to do some work. But, you know, have you started thinking about how you engage that wider elected members? Because there's a risk that those voices get lost. And I think there's a risk that the frustrations might build up then if they feel that those concerns that they've got can't filter through, which we need to think about what mechanism that takes, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. And so I don't think we have a coherent answer to that, apart, you know, at the minute, because we are to be really clear, like we're at the start of the journey here. We're not coming to you with a fully formed proposal, as I hope you can see. So I think inevitably the more strategic aspects of this particular issue are the ones that rise to the top. So it's complicated, but it's easier to talk about this in a rail and a Traws Cymru environment because your variables are that much more reduced and you're dealing with inevitably more people. And I think similarly then in a franchise environment, I think my colleagues here would sort of like as far as they can to be talking to you as CJCs, because then it confines us as TFW to 4 strategic conversations in the short term. But I totally accept the point that you make there in terms of how do we deal with that ongoing thing. So I'd happily take your advice, and perhaps that's something for you to reflect on as a group as well, because similarly the other end of the spectrum is as you say, if TFW's got to have, well, not just 22 conversations, if we're dealing with those community councils as well, it'll become totally unmanageable. So, but certainly wouldn't want those comments to be lost. So would happily take your advice on what you think that looks like. And I suspect none of us probably know the answer now because it's all new territory, isn't it? The new powers and new skills to be brought in.
And that's the thing, because I mean, in terms of let's take the health and social care space, for example, local authority scrutiny committees have the ability to call in, or they have the ability to call in any national body, and in the sense they could ask transfer to Wales. But do you really want to be having those conversations 22 times? Is the question, or is there another mechanism that we can make sure that local members can feed in any concerns or issues throughout the year? We need to think about that, is the point, because I think if we don't do that, and if we don't ensure that members feel there's a route for them to challenge or to scrutinise, I think there'll be frustration bubbling, isn't it? Because
I totally accept that. Yeah,
there's a risk of that, particularly when they see the powers now being vested in Transport for Wales, through franchising. So it won't be a case of all these bad private operators won't come down my road. No. These have been commissioned by a public body, isn't it, under the auspices of Welsh Government. So there'll be that expectation, I suppose, that they have a right to scrutinise and feed in, isn't it?
Yeah. Within a bus space, I suppose part of the answer is just being able to give a coherent answer, even if the answer is no. To explain, and again, that for that not to be the end of the conversation, but to explain this is where we presently are, and it will come down to a matter of budget availability and the level of public good that we're trying to achieve. I suppose from if you compare it to where we are now, there'll be an expectation, won't there, that TFW would show why have we defined the network that we have. My colleagues have been doing that throughout. And we should be able to show you our workings in terms of the data that's there. That's not, that just isn't the case in a commercial public transport environment at the minute. And then for you as local authorities, with the budgets you have available to subsidise the network, you all know you've got to deal with the pressures of how far will that budget take you. But nevertheless, we'd love to provide services to everyone's door. It's just have to make the best with those public funds that are available. So I think with the skills that we've got here, and the modelling that we've got, we should be able to demonstrate, why we've cut the cloth in the way that way we have. And I suppose whilst I'd like to come and speak to you on a quarterly basis with some, broad metrics across the network, to be clear, that bus franchising system is expected to be reviewed every 13 months, I think it is. So you can be having a slower, longer conversation, and then obviously every 13 months we have to sort of drop the barrier, as it were, and re-establish a new pattern. So that, I suppose, that probably helps to feather some of those conversations that, once we're into it. I mean, obviously everyone's trying to establish something brilliant from day one. Once we're there, you're then into a longer conversation that we can roll. So that probably helps with the breadth of stakeholders we've got to manage then.
Yeah. No. Okay. That's great. Yeah. So that's great, and we can, as I continue that thinking and those conversations over the next couple of months.
Great.
Okay, great.
Thank you all. Cheers.
Os yna unrhyw gwestiynau pellach neu pawb yn weddol hapus, pawb yn gyfforddus, so jyst gwybodaeth o'r adroddiad. So diolch Ben am hynny, gwerthfawrogi ni fawr, a bydd clywyn cysylltu i weld beth yw'r fformat gorau ynglyn â'r panel. Mewn da bryd. OK, gret. Diolch yn fawr. So, newn ni symud ymlaen te i'r eitem nesaf, sef eitem 6 ar blaen rhaglen waith. Chloe, do you want to come in on the forward work plan at all, or...?
Yeah, Chair, just to note the forward work programme, we are arranging a date for January, as previously discussed, in order to accommodate the final transport delivery plan before it goes to CJC for approval on the 27th of January. So that's in the works at the moment. And yeah, just the usual, if anyone's got any further agenda items to add to the forward work programme, please just let me know and we can do so.
There we are. And then in March, then we've got a further presentation from Transport of Wales, and the bus franchising update is there as well. But I suppose we can, we can have a discussion with Ben and others to see what what exactly is presented there, isn't it? Given
Yeah,
what
we'll hopefully have a structure for that by then. So yeah.
By then. OK, gret, diolch yn fawr. Right, os unrhyw sylwadau, neu unrhyw gwestiynau ar hwnna? Na, pawb yn hapus, pawb yn gyfforddus? Na ni, gret. Na ni, fel dos dim eitemau bris wedi dod i law, so ar y nod i ni, gallwn ni ddod o'r cyfarfod i ben. So diolch yn fawr chi gyda'r presenoldeb a'ch cyfraniadau, a beth newn ni nawr yw sicrhau bod Stewart neu fi yn rhannu, neu Chloe yn rhannu gyda chi drafft a llythyr sydd wedi cael ei drafod gyda'r cyfrwyddwyr mwyn hala at Llywodraeth Cymru. So gobeithio newn ni naill ai heddi neu fori wella i gael ei bant cyn gynta sy'n bosib. Na ni, gret, diolch yn fawr i chi, os yw pawb yn hapus